Hi guys, we are going to go back to the day 4 worksheet. So please go to the day 4 worksheet where we left off. And we are going to scroll down and just look at the graphs of sine and cosine. We hopefully remember that positive sine looks like this, whereas negative sine is a reflection. And I mean, looks like that, but better than what I just drew because that was hideous. That was not the best either. But the point is that positive sine starts at the midline and goes upward. Negative sine starts at the midline and goes downwards. Now, cosine starts at the maximum. And negative cosine, because of that reflection, negative cosine is going to start at the minimum. So we should have this copied from yesterday. And these graphs are really important to remember. We're going to scroll down to one of these questions. Now, for this question, in order to figure out the equation, you have to identify all the components. The first thing you're going to want to do is identify where you start. Now, this graph, where we're starting, we start on the y-axis. We start here. And specifically, we're starting at the midline, the middle, and we are going up. If you start at the middle, oh no. Looks like my pen died. Give me a minute. Oh no, never mind that. It's just that my computer froze. Okay, so my computer froze. Don't know what happened. Hope that everything is okay. We start at the midline and we go upwards. You know what starts at the midline? Sine starts at the midline. If you go back to the chart, which you should have on handy, if you start at the midline and go up, that is positive sine. So now that you know you have a positive sine equation, you're going to write y equals positive sine of x. Now, when we go, actually, you know what? I'm just going to keep filling out the chart. Let's find our middle. Our middle, that midline, what cuts through the middle, is at 0. We're going to call this y equals 0. Your amplitude is this distance from the middle to the top. You're going from 0 to 3. Your amplitude is 3. Your period. Let's see about the period. We are starting here. You go up a hill and you go down a valley. That is one period of the sine curve. That is from 0 to 2 pi. So your period is 2 pi. And guys, you have to remember what one period of the sine curve looks like. One period looks like an S that fell over. It's a hill and a valley. You got to solve for your frequency. Your frequency is 2 pi over the period. 2 pi over 2 pi is a frequency of 1. Now, if you struggle with remembering what goes where, you are going to remember the phrase AFM. It's amplitude, frequency, midline. Your amplitude was 3. Your frequency was 1. Your midline is plus 0. You could write this as 3 sine of x. That would be your equation. Let's skip down to number 4. Forget about phase shifts. I will explain what that is in person with you guys. So let's just, and forget about what this says too. We're just going to write a trig function. Now the question are you sine or cosine? Are you positive or negative? Let's look where you start. You start on the y-axis at x equals 0. We are starting at the maximum, so this is going to be a cosine. And because you start at the maximum, it's going to be positive. If you started at the minimum, it would be negative cosine. Now you need your midline, your amplitude. You need your period, and you need your frequency. So let's find out. We have a middle. Let's see, our top is at 4, our bottom is at -2. What number is in the middle? Now, if you're stuck, take the average. 4 plus -2 over 2. You get a middle of 1. So my midline is y equals 1. The amplitude is the distance from the middle to the top. From 1 to 4, this distance is 3. You could also count downwards. This distance is 3 as well. Now, your period is from max to max. This is one cycle. We started at 0, we went to pi, your period is pi. Your frequency is 2 pi over your period. 2 pi divided by pi is 2. Now, let's write the equation out. We have y equals positive cosine of x. We are going to remember A, F, M, amplitude, frequency, midline. Your amplitude was 3, your frequency was 2, your midline is +1. So this is the equation of that graph. And there are other ways to write this. We will talk about it another time. Okay, we're going to call it quits for this one. We're going to go to the day 3 worksheet. And in hindsight, I'm really sorry that I told you to go to the day 4 worksheet because that's the day 2 worksheet. Oh my Lord, what is happening? Anyway, I'm really hoping you were able to figure out that it was the day 2 worksheet because I'm pretty sure I said day 4. Oh well. Anyway, let's go on to the day 3 worksheet. We're going to start to get into word problems. And with word problems, you need to know some formulas. So they're saying the path traveled by a roller coaster is modeled by that equation. What is the maximum altitude? They're asking for the max. Now, usually, or no, remember if we recall this equation from the first night's homework, your maximum is equal to your midline plus your amplitude, right? I'm hoping. If you have a graph, now remember, this graph happens as a shift up. We are up at 30. This is your A, F, M. Your amplitude is at 30. So let's say this is 30. Your graph starts all the way up here. And then this is a sine curve. Sine looks like this. Your amplitude is how much you go up. So if you started at 30 and you went up by 27, that would be a maximum height of 57. Did you have to draw it out? No. We're going to get very good at memorizing the formula. Your maximum is your mid plus your amplitude. Midline is 30, amplitude is 27, and you're going to get 57. By the way, your minimum is what happens when you subtract 27. If you were to subtract 27, you would get 3. So clearly my graph is not to scale because that's not great, but at least the numbers are right. They're asking you which equation represents the graph below. Now you could graph it. However, we're not there yet. It's important to know that you start at the minimum. And you guys need to just know those graphs. What starts at the minimum? Negative cosine. Cross out the sine functions. Now you're going to look at your, you know what, let's just write the equation from scratch. We have y equals negative cosine of x. You want your amplitude, your frequency, your midline. AFM. The midline is at y equals 0, plus 0. Your amplitude from 0 to 2 is 2. So I'm going to put a 2 in front. That's why both of these have the 2 in front. They're telling you your amplitude. Now you need your period. Your period is from, we're starting at the minimum, so your period is from minimum to minimum. This is one cycle of the negative cosine curve. From min to min, you're starting at 0, you're going to pi. So your period equals pi. The problem, this is AFM, not APM. So you need your frequency. The frequency is 2 pi over the period. Your period was pi, so your frequency is 2. You're going to simplify this to be y equals negative 2 cosine of 2x. And that would be choice 3. Okay, let's try a multiple choice strategy question. So we have the depth of the water at a marker 20 feet from the shore in a bay is depicted by the graph below. If the depth d is measured in feet in time and t is measured in hours since midnight, what is the equation for the depth of the water at the marker? So think about like a buoy, and you know how with waves, a buoy in the water goes up and down? That's what's happening here. The depth of the water as the buoy is, no, I'm totally making things up. We're talking about the depth of the water. I'm so sorry. Sometimes there's buoy questions. Your depth of the water with high tide and low tide. When it's high tide, the depth will be higher. When it's low tide, the depth will be lower. So it's like high tide, low tide, high tide, low tide. That's what makes this periodic. Now, they want to know what type of equation it is. You need to figure out sine or cosine. Where are you starting? You have your maximum, you have your minimum, and you have your midline. So you're starting at the middle. And we go upwards because the graph is increasing. Because you start at the midline, it's sine. Because you go upwards, it is positive. So we know we have y equals positive sine of x. We're going to cross out the cosine functions. And now we have A, F, M. Let's look for that midline. The midline, what number is happening here at the middle? Well, you have two options. Your midline is either 5 or your midline is 9. And very clearly, that ain't 5. So it has to be 9. And if you don't realize that, this is 12. No, I lied. This is 14. And this would be 4. The middle of 4 and 14 is 9. If you don't know that, your midline is your maximum plus your minimum divided by 2. And you get that the middle is 9. So because your midline is 9, you're going to add 9 at the end. Now, very clearly, it has to be choice 4. It's the only one with a midline of 9. However, let's finish it out. Your amplitude from 9 to 14, this distance is 5. So we're going to put our amplitude in front. The period is always the most complicated one. Your period. Keep going. You did the hill, do the valley. Your period is a hill and the valley. This is from 0 to 12. So the period is 12. Your frequency is 2 pi over period. 2 pi over 12. 2 divided by 12 is 1/6, so you get pi over 6. So that's how answer choice 4 was formed. Now, I wish I could bring up my calculator on here and show you how this works. However, of course, the calculator feature isn't working. But if you wanted to, you could put this in y equals. Make sure you go to mode and you select radian mode. We don't use degree mode. We're going to use radian mode for the rest of high school. And then you have to change your window. And under the window button, you are going to have to choose an X min, X max, Y min, and Y max. We have done this before. So your minimum, your X values, here is X. X equals 0. Here is where you end. Here, X is equal to, how much are we counting by? Every 3 boxes is 6 units. So 22, right? Each box is worth 2 points. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24. Never mind. Can't count. 24. So your X values are going from 0 to 24. Your Y values are going from Y equals 0 to Y equals 20. And I really encourage you to put this on your calculator right now and look to see, you're going to see this exact graph in that exact position, and everything should work out. If you're not using your calculators, that's a shame, because that's a great way to get the answer if you don't know what you're doing. So for this one, what you could do is use the calculator. Notice how your X values, let's start at X equals 0, X equals pi. So your X min would be 0, your X max would be pi. This is under the window button on the calculator. Your Y values are, let's say that, what, if this is negative 0.5, this is negative 1? And this would be Y equals 1. So Y min, the minimum Y value is negative 1. The maximum Y value is positive 1. So if you're actually doing this on your calculator, you can adjust the calculator and put these all in Y equals, which one gives you that graph. It's time consuming, absolutely, but it will get you the right answer as long as you're in radian mode. If you don't want to do the calculator strategy, what you could do instead is you need to figure out where you're starting. You start at the max. What starts at the max? Positive cosine. You have A, F, M. If you're going from -5 to +5, what is in the middle? Your middle is Y equals 0. So your midline is 0. Your amplitude, this distance from 0 to 0.5, is 0.5. That's your amplitude. Notice how they didn't write 0.5, they wrote 1/2. So you might want to keep the numbers that they have in their answer choices. Your frequency. Although, let's go back and cross things out. You need a 1/2 in front. This doesn't have a 1/2. This doesn't have a 1/2 in front. So we crossed out 2 and 4. We just need to find the appropriate frequency. You're starting at the max. Your period is from max to max. This whole thing is one cycle from 0 to pi. So your period is pi. Your frequency is the formula 2 pi over your period. Your period was pi, so your frequency is 2. That means this graph cycles twice from 0 to 2 pi. Your frequency is always from 0 to 2 pi, which is a full circle. So we're going to put our frequency of 2 inside. That would be this one. Okay, let's try some mixed practice. And some of these get pretty confusing. They want to know which one represents a cosine function. Cosine, positive cosine, starts at the max. Negative cosine starts at the minimum. So this one starts at the max. This is positive cosine. That's great. This one starts at the min. This is negative cosine. Great. This starts at the midline and goes upwards. This is positive sine. They wanted cosine. This starts at the midline and goes downwards. This is negative sine. And these are things that you just have to remember and get really fast with. Okay, we eliminated 2 options. No horizontal shift. We didn't even learn about a horizontal shift yet anyway, so don't worry about it. An amplitude of 2. This distance from the middle to the top is 2. You're going from 0 to 2. This distance, starting at 0, going to 2, this distance is 2. So you still can't cross anything out. But what you can work with is the period. They want a period of 2 pi over 3. So let's draw it out. Let's draw one cycle of each one. This is starting at the max. So one period is at the max. Now this is 0, and this is question mark. Now here we go. This is the minimum. The period is from minimum to minimum. This is 0. This is question mark. Who knows? But if you look at your answer choices, you want the period to be 2 pi over 3. So the question is, can this be 2 pi over 3? So look at where you are on the graph. 2 pi over 3 is over here. This is not 2 pi over 3, so it's not choice 1. Now, if this is 1 pi, right? 1 pi, it's very possible that this is 2 pi over 3 because 2 pi over 3 is less than pi. So to say that this might be 2 pi over 3 is an accurate description. Now, if that doesn't work for you, if your period is 2 pi over 3, your frequency is 2 pi over the period. So your frequency is 2 pi over 2 pi over 3. This is 2 pi divided by 2 pi over 3. Do you remember keep, change, flip? You keep the first fraction, you change it to multiplication, and you flip it the second fraction. When you multiply, the 2 pi's cancel out, and you're left with 3. So the frequency is 3. What that means is that you'll see 3 cycles from 0 to 2 pi. And if you take a look at this graph, here's 2 pi. How many cycles do you see? This is 1 cycle. Here's another from min to min. This is 2 cycles. And now from min to min, this is 3 cycles from 0 to 2 pi. That's a frequency of 3. If they're asking which function has the greatest maximum, you do need to remember that your maximum is the midline plus your amplitude, right? For example, here, your midline is 4, your amplitude is 2. The max equals 4 plus 2. Where's the middle? How much are you going up by? So the max is 6. Although that was a little silly to do because you can visually see that the maximum is 6. Here, my max is 4. But let's do with the other ones. You have A, F, M. There's a plus 0 here. So you have your midline plus your amplitude is equal to your max. You would subtract your amplitude for a minimum. So 0 plus 4 equals a maximum of 4. For this one, A, D, we haven't learned that yet, but F would be here, and this is M. So remember, outside of parentheses is a shift up. Inside parentheses is shifts left or right. Because you have a minus, that's actually heading a shift to the right. But a shift right does not change how much you go up and down. So your midline plus your amplitude equals your max. Your midline is 1. Your amplitude is always positive. The negative represents a reflection. The negative does not have to do with your amplitude. So the amplitude is 6. If you're starting at 1 and if you go up by 6 units, you're now up to 7. So 7 was the largest number out of all of your options. We might do these two and then call it a day. Which equation is represented on the graph shown below? This graph starts at the middle and goes down. Middle, start at middle, and go, sorry for my bad handwriting on here. This is going to be y equals negative sine of x, because you're starting at the middle and you're going downwards. You need your amplitude, your frequency, and your midline, but most importantly, look at your answer choices. This is negative sine, not cosine, not sine. From there, your midline is y equals 0. Your amplitude is 3. Look at your answer choices. There's only one with an amplitude of 3. It's choice 2. So let's find your period. Your period, we have a valley and a hill. That is your period. So this period, in this case, is equal to 2 pi. Your frequency is 2 pi over the period. 2 pi over 2 pi, your period, is 1. So the frequency here is 1. You get y equals negative 3 sine of x, because 1 times x is x, and plus 0, who cares? Let's try 4, and then we'll be done, even though I want to keep going. But, you know, there's always more room for practice, but we got to call it quits sometimes. This graph starts at the middle. It is the minimum of what they're showing, but do you see how this graph down here has a valley and a hill? This is not a cosine curve. You have a sine curve has a hill and a valley. Cosine looks like a U, but it's a fanned out U. If you had negative cosine, it would be a fanned out, like, I don't know, upside down U, and negative sign goes down first, but whatever. My point is, this is not cosine because negative cosine would look more like this. Where's the fanning out part of it? This is just like a U. That's negative cosine. There's no fanning out. So what's happening here is that you have a sine curve, but they're only showing you the top portion of it. So they're only showing you the hill. They're not showing you the valley. So you're starting at the midline and you're going up. This is y equals sine of x. You need your amplitude, your frequency, and your midline. The midline is y equals 0. Your amplitude, this distance from the middle to the top is at 2. Your amplitude is 2. At this point, you should have crossed out choice 3 and choice 4 because only choice 1 and 2 have an amplitude of 2. Now, for your period is this whole thing, the top piece and the bottom piece. The question is, where do you end? So do you see that at half of it, it is 2 pi? So this full cycle must be 4 pi. So the period is equal to 4 pi. The frequency is 2 pi over your period. 2 pi divided by, what is your period? 4 pi? Is equal to, the pi's cancel, and 2 divided by 4 is 1/2. Which actually makes sense because if your frequency is 1/2, that means you see half of a cycle from 0 to 2 pi. Here is 2 pi. From 0 to 2 pi, you have half of a cycle. That's the definition of your frequency. Anyway, I'm done. Have a fabulous weekend. Goodbye.